Today we're going to begin reading the story, The Wild Life of Christian the Lion. So before we start today, I want you to think about this. Can a lion that's born in a cage ever learn to be free? Now, just from personal experiences and things that I've learned over the years, most animals born in captivity, or if you know, being captured and kept in a cage, most animals born in captivity cannot adjust to wildlife. And the reason that is because animals that live in a cage, they don't have the same natural tendencies or the same innate abilities that animals in the wild have because they haven't experienced it. So let's dive deep into this story about Christian the Lion today. As we read this week, we're really going to be focusing on the theme. And as you should remember, the theme is what the lesson of the story is, or the moral. What lesson are you supposed to learn and then take and apply to your own life? Let's begin reading. The lion cub had spent his life in a cage. He'd been born in a zoo in England. Two of his sisters had been sold to a circus, and he had been sold to a London department store called Harrods. Now in November 1969, the little cub was for sale again. He was put on display in a store. Between kittens and sheepdogs, the little lion's future looked grim. Grim is another word for sad or depressing. So I'm going to actually make an annotation or a note here. And I'm going to note that, or I'm going to ask, why are they able to sell a lion cub? Because that's my first question reading this. Why is the United Kingdom or London not blocking them from just selling a baby lion like this? So let's read further. The then two young men, Ace Burke and John Rendell, walked into Harrods and saw the lion cub trapped in a small cage. Buying a lion cub was probably the last thing they imagined doing. They had just graduated from college and were living in a small apartment above the furniture store where they worked. But even after they got home, Ace and John couldn't stop thinking about the cub. They scraped together all the money they could, which would equal about $6,500 today. They went back to the store and bought the cub. The two men had already decided on a name for him, Christian. I'm going to make another note here because I have a question about this. Why are these men interested in a lion? Do they want to keep it as a pet? Or are they trying to save it? We don't know. Maybe we'll find out. The next subheading reads, Future Furniture Store Lion. Christian was a 30-pound ball of fluff when he moved into the basement of the furniture store. Oh, that makes me sad. He's living in a basement. He quickly made himself at home. He hid behind desks and chairs and then leaped out to play. He climbed on Ace's and John's lap while they tried to talk on the phone. People flocked to the shop to see the furniture store lion. The radio host tried to get Christian to roar into the microphone. Christian began chewing up the wires instead. I'm going to make an annotation here because this is funny. I can make a connection because this is exactly how my cats act at home. The next heading is growing up. By April, the fluff ball had grown into 130 pounds. Wow, so he went from 30 pounds and gained 100 pounds. And just from April into, what did it say? November. Wow, so about 6 months he gained 100 pounds. He was still gentle, but eventually he would turn into a 500-pound predator. Uh-oh, predator means someone that's dangerous and willing to kill other prey with razor-sharp claws and 4-inch long fangs. That sounds dangerous. In the wild, lions prowl thousands of acres of grassland and forests. London was no place for Christian. But where could he go? We knew we couldn't betray him by putting him in a zoo, John recalled later. Ace and John were growing desperate. Then one day, two surprise visitors walked into the furniture store. Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna were actors who had starred in a popular wildlife movie called Born Free. The movie told the story of a lion cub named Elsa. She had been living in the wilds of African country of Kenya when her mother was shot and killed. She was saved by a couple named Joe and George Adamson, who raised Elsa and then successfully released her back into the wild. I'm going to make an annotation here because I'm wondering, are they going to release Christian back into the wild? So there's some captions here next to the pictures. Life in London. This is Christian joins Ace and John on a ride around London. On the far right, he takes a drink in the bathroom of the furniture store where he lived with Ace and John. Could you imagine a lion drinking out of your toilet? That's crazy. Here's Christian at play. He loved kids and was always gentle, but Ace and John feared that as he grew, he could accidentally hurt someone. Yeah, I could feel their energy on that. I'd be very scared of that as well. The two actors Travers and McKenna contacted George Adamson, who was still living in Kenya. Adamson agreed to help Christian become free. So they answered my question. They are going to try to make him free. Going wild. In August of 1970, Ace and John and Christian arrived at Adamson's camp in Kora region of Kenya. The plan was to release Christian into the wild, but it wasn't so simple. Animals raised in captivity don't always have the skills to survive in the wild. Christian had never lived among lions. He had never hunted for food. So these are the disadvantages that I was talking about in the beginning of the story, that throughout history, we kind of know when we captivate and keep animals in captivation, that they don't always have the skills that they need in order to survive in the wild. So luckily, Adamson had an idea. He would introduce Christian to other captive lions at the camp. Adamson hoped Christian would bond with them and form his own pride or group. Christian and his pride would then return to be encouraged to venture into the wild together, to learn to stalk prey and fend for themselves. I really like that idea. So my thought here is animals that are being introduced to the wild together can be more successful. Think about it. If you have someone there with you, it definitely makes the journey easier. At first, Christian wanted to sleep on Ace's and John's cots, but he gradually befriended the other lions. In a few weeks, they were roaming all day, and soon it was clear that Ace and John could leave him. The goodbye was heartbreaking for John and Ace. Christian chased after their truck as they drove away. They flew back to London feeling like they had abandoned their best friend. Adamson assured them that Christian was thriving, that he and his new pride were spending more and more time away from the camp. But John and Ace wanted to see for themselves. So together again. 10 months later, in July 1971, they returned to Kenya with Adamson's help. They found Christian not far from a camp. They watched Christian from a distance, marveling at how he had grown. He was now 300 pounds and 6 feet long from his hind legs to his head. Would they recognize him? When Christian spotted the men, he began to creep slowly towards them. Ace and John called out to Christian. At the sound of their voices, Christian started to rush to them. Most people would be terrified to see a huge lion charging at them, but Ace and John were thrilled. When Christian reached them, he reared up on his hind legs, he flung his paws over Ace's shoulders and rubbed his mane against Ace's head. Then he reached over to John and pulled him in, a half-wild lion hugging the humans who raised him. Ace and John cried when they left. They knew they would always miss Christian. But as their plane took off, they saw Christian and his new family perched on the top of a rocky mountain. Christian was free to roam the wild like his ancestors. He would never see the inside of a cage again. I'm going to make a note here because this gives me a good feeling. This makes me feel happy that Christian isn't in captivity any longer. Let's read the captions under the pictures, all grown up. This is full-grown Christian weighing nearly 500 pounds. He would soon lead a pride of his own and live free in the wild. A famous reunion, this is the picture of John and Ace's reunion with Christian, was captured on film, and it was one of the most popular YouTube videos ever posted. We dare you not to cry while you watch. So what is the connection? Imagine you're Christian the lion. If you could write a letter to John and Ace telling them what you think about their decision to set them free and why, use details from the article. So you don't have to write this, but just think about it. If you got a chance to speak to John and Ace, what would you say to them? Do you think that they made the right decision, and why? That's the end of our story for today. So go ahead and make sure you write your personal annotations on your Google Slides doc.